Hello, I'm Chris Skowronski from Berlin Practical Philosophy International Forum, and today I have Lydia Amir, who is a fantastic person. Lydia, you practice philosophy, academic teaching, coaching, mentoring. Probably we may say you're a public intellectual, given your presence in media. And you publish many books, texts, chapters, and you write about transformative philosophy. You write about philosophy of humor. You write about taking philosophy seriously, about the good life, and on the human condition. Also, you're an expert on history of philosophy, and you write about Nietzsche, about Spinoza, about Santayana, and many other figures. So my first question, what is the practical meaning of philosophy?
First, thank you so much, Chris, for inviting me to this conversation. I really appreciate that. I cherish that. And thank you for mentioning these things I'm doing recently. I really appreciate it. It was nice to hear that I'm doing all these things. Now, about your question, the practical meaning of philosophy being the love of wisdom, we have to think what can be the practicalities of loving wisdom. So first, it will be like pursuing wisdom. You know, when you love something, someone, you pursue at any cost. So you would like very much to be near wisdom, to have wisdom, to do something with this wisdom. You don't know exactly what. And I suggest that once you are near wisdom, what you may try to do is to be happy in the presence of wisdom. That means you should at least carve your own happiness, looking at the harsh, maybe realities of the world, the harsh realities of relationship between different people, your own internal conflicts. So being wise would be a good beginning in order to be happy, which is quite a challenge. But in my belief, it's worth the effort.
Tell me such a thing because I'm trying to develop kind of idea or philosophical concept. Its name is Stoic Pragmatism, and the practicality of philosophy according to this concept would be that, for example, by, as you say, aiming at wisdom, helps us avoid mistakes. Is it something similar?
Well, I don't think we can avoid mistake, and I don't think maybe we should. Depends which kind of mistake. Of course, if other people are involved and you create harm, it's more problematic. But in your case, trying to avoid mistakes would be to try not to experiment, to try not to go out there, to minimize your capacity for courage, for creativity. There's always leaps, there are always jumps into the unknown unless you take them, unless you forget about mistakes, unless you realize that it's always a virgin situation, a virgin ground, and you need just to try it. So you will be paralyzed. So it's not about avoiding mistakes, but learning from the mistakes. And I had a very harsh PhD advisor. He was a Popperian, and he believed that you learn only from mistakes, from refutations. So even though he was seeing that I was going to crash, he would never say stop and go that direction. He wanted me to crash so that I might learn something. Because you cannot learn by another person's advice. You have to learn by your own. This is harsh. But then you understand that the general meaning of failure, people are very afraid of failure, is not something that we sufficiently analyzed. Failure is part of life, and it can be considered failure only according to some expectations which are not to fail. But these expectations are unrealistic. Actually, we fail again and again. If humanity would, in each generation, follow the advice of the former generation, it would advance. But each generation has to do it for itself. This is why we are always more or less in the same situation, morally speaking, philosophically speaking, maybe technologically not. But the most important thing every generation again and again has to do, for example, to draw logos out of mythos. We begin with mythos, with stories, with religions, with I don't know, with the irrational, and to be more rational, more logical. This is an effort that every person does. So
Yeah, but what about, for example, responsibility for our happiness, ours and the people around? So is it not that this responsibility makes us kind of feel that we should be careful with the mistakes that we may commit? That's why we should be wiser, because of the responsibility for the happiness, as I say, to us, but perhaps more importantly, the people we are responsible for.
yes, of course, when you are responsible for a person, you do not take unnecessary risk that involve them. And of course, your own capacity of leaping or jumping, in the void are minimized. But originally, there was a choice to have people that you will be responsible for. So it all depends at which age you do that. You can do maybe your experiments before that. And sometimes you can take experiments on yourself without inflicting too much damage on the others. There's always this story about this painter, the French painter Gauguin, was married, was a banker, had two daughters, and then decided he wanted to paint. He wanted to go to Haiti. But, without the money, without this, the daughters could not marry. And he said, I want to be a painter. We forget these stories because he succeeded as a painter. But this is not the story. We have to imagine Gauguin unsuccessful and then ask, was it a right choice, to bet on his being a painter, or was it simply egoistical? It's very important to understand that unless we are happy, our chances of making other people happy are very slim. And we forget that. We prefer a miserable Gauguin, married and banker, and the daughters married with an idea of a miserable father. But we don't imagine that we need a happy Gauguin. The situation is much more complex. We need a happy Gauguin to have the daughters imagine the possibility of happiness, of self-fulfillment, etc. So it's a thorny a problem, because we have a responsibility. I don't know if it's a responsibility to be happy. We don't have a duty. The French philosopher Alain, we have a duty, he said we have a duty to be happy. This is a little bit too harsh. I think for our own sake, we can reach happiness, but it's a very good means to make other people happy. And so this is maybe something you wanted to address later, but I can say it now. We think it's egoistical to be happy. But if we realize that our own happiness makes us more generous, more tolerant, more cheerful, more smiling, more accepting of ourselves and others, then it's good for the others. Unless, of course, we say we are happy, etc. People won't like that. But we say nothing. It just shows, I think, or the benefits of it. Everybody enjoy that. Hume, the philosopher David Hume, said something similar about cheerfulness. He says it's a virtue, not only for the person, because it cheers everybody. It's important socially. So a happy person in the family is the best thing the family would like to wish for. And so instead of thinking about ourselves, thinking that the other also benefit from our own happiness, a happy teacher is a better teacher. A happy teacher is a less cruel person. A happy neighbor is a good neighbor. Do you understand what I mean? Not happy, just cheerful and joyful, but deeply happy, not necessarily about the circumstances of their life. The person who has actually resolved most of their conflicts and accepted with a smile and a good sense of humor these inconsistencies in their own character, which they can generalize to inconsistencies in the human condition in other human beings.
Lydia, this is exactly what I wanted to say by using different words. What I did not say, but you will agree, I think, with me that not to be happy is kind of dangerous, because if you are not happy, your frustration may radiate and many other people will be affected. This is the main danger when you are not happy. So
Yes,
happiness, it's not just responsibility of egoistic type. It is also
no,
social, because the
yes,
people around, especially a family or those whom you affect with your
yes,
feeling happy or not happy, they will profit or not profit. So it is not just our private job or private. And I get it back to this word responsibility, right?
yeah,
To have this. This is what I meant actually when I was talking about responsibility. That your responsibility for being happy, although it sounds strange, it affects people you love or affects people close to you, exactly as you say, a happy teacher, or
yes,
more to put it in a wider sense, a teacher that shows enthusiasm, good
yeah,
emotions,
yeah,
interest in the things that the teacher is teaching. So it must affect in some way the student. So such a teacher is a better teacher. So it is not teacher's private business to be happy. Actually, there's this emotion, positive emotion, gonna be transmitted to people around. So I think
yes.
we do agree.
Yes, we do. But if we say it's not private, we're beginning to go on dangerous grounds, as if it will be, socially, it's terrible. In America, they have this, that you have to be cheerful. It's not being cheerful. It's really being truly happy. It's very important. And then it cannot be a duty. It cannot be social. It cannot be forced, because frankly, few people achieve that. It cannot be forced. It has to be genuine. A person who is not happy is dragging their own self, their moods everywhere. And it affects the work and the students. And Nietzsche talked about resentment. It affects the way a thinker thinks. You attack people. You are not free of yourself. You're dragging the past. You're dragging the present. You're dragging the people who harmed you. So I think to be able to have a clean slate, clean table, to be, I don't know if it's born in you or, fresh. Every time you wake up, every time you come to class, open, fresh to what's going on. This is the duty. This is what I said to my cousin. I say, I have one duty, to make my soul, my brain flat, nice, clean every day.
Okay, so my second point is, or my second question is related to that, because we do not get this sense of happiness or whatever at once. We have to, I think, a little bit work to get there in this. So using philosophical language and using your language, philosophy is transformative.
Yeah.
Could you explain in what sense philosophy is transformative?
Listen, Chris, it's very interesting. It seems to be the most important secret in the West, that Western philosophy is transformative. Nobody knows that. Nobody thinks that modern Western philosophy is transformative. It's as if all movements of philosophical practice assume that philosophy must be different from the academe, because modern or contemporary philosophy cannot be transformative. And this is not true. Every philosopher you take, even in modern time, not to talk about antiquity, they addressed philosophy, they wrote philosophy, hoping for something in the human condition or in themselves to change. But they sometimes don't say it very clearly. It's a very important theoretical work to find out what is the condition that this philosopher wants us to get out of. What are the causes of this condition? How is change offered? Is it offered to all? If for the few, whose few? How do you determine who are those fews? Is it viable for us today? Is it desirable? I think these are very important theoretical questions, and also did this philosopher live according to this way? Yes, so it's a wide field of theoretical first concern, and then understanding that philosophy brings about very deep transformation. I know the word is important. It's different from therapy. Therapy is piecemeal changes. But philosophy works by big ideas, self-realization, authenticity, peace of mind, flourishing, yes, redemption, philosophic redemption in the here and now. So these big ideas that philosophy usually offers and the path to minimizing the gap between the reality and the ideal is that path to self-perfection, which is actually nothing more than self-education. Philosophy being education and mainly self-education, because we cannot educate someone to values, yes, to wisdom. It's something that the person needs to appropriate, as Kierkegaard said, and make their own. So it's self-education mainly, and that self-education is deeply transformative of the human being. It can be a lifelong task, and usually happiness can be of this sort of task because circumstances change. You think you have something stable, you have stabilized your character. This is actually what is the key to happiness. But circumstances have changed so much, they can be so tragic that you may need to make a readjustment. So philosophy is deeply transformative if we wish to be transformed by it. We have a responsibility if you want to do that, if we want.
Okay, so Lydia, you are saying actually that philosophy is self-transformative. I mean, that it refers, not philosophy itself, but it refers to those who want to practice it, that it is self-transformative in the sense of self-education.
Yes, yes, it is that. Philosophy is always about Bildung, is always about education, self-education. It's about probing the social self or even the psychological self and seeing if you cannot do anything better, probing the ideas of happiness that society offers you and showing that actually they may be not so good. Or, as the Hellenistic school said, the psychological self is not something that you should stop there. Philosophy usually offers you technologies much more advanced of the self, and the possibilities are enormous in trying to advance.
Okay, so I have now a question, I think very important to me at least, because in this Stoic pragmatism kind of project, there are two tendencies. Using your words about transformation, the Stoic trajectory would say, or would talk about self-transformation, but the pragmatist trajectory would talk about transformation. Transformation meaning of the external world, for example, external meaning social institutions in the first place. So my question is, are you talking about now more about self-transformation of persons, people living here and there, or you are talking about transformation or betterment, or using pragmatist vocabulary, amelioration of public institutions, or you are talking about both?
I'm talking about amelioration of one's own being. I have this idea that philosophical practice should be something instead of perfectionist, melioristic, and it should be about the self first. Now, institution is very important as well, but it's another topic. I'm working about the work that a person can do on themselves. I know that philosophers find this very weird. Martha Nussbaum, for example, says, how is it possible that the Romans never thought that they need to change the laws? They were trying in a way to save or change each consciousness by itself. But Chris, to this day, this is what we have. There are wars, there are corona, there are other problems. I don't have to tell you, we're living in the same epoch. So it's mainly about self-transformation. And when you are transformed or happy in that way, that you have resolved your internal conflicts, you are more free to work on others' behalf and to advance changes because you're not dragging your personal things. So the capacity for action or amelioration in the social way are greater.
Okay. So I agree with that. I think you are doing practicing similar philosophical project that as I do. But what's the difference now between us is, and I would like to ask you, because I know nothing about that, because I cannot tell you or anybody that I have a sense of humor, but you are an expert on humor, or philosophy of humor, philosophy of the comic. So my question is, with reference to what we have been talking about, how would you explain the following: humor as a method of philosophical practice? I expect you will say that humor or sense of humor is something important for self-transformation, that it is helpful because it will probably will make us in a kind of see problems at distance or something like this, and humor perhaps will reduce the tensions or conflicts. I expect that perhaps you will say this, but I don't know what you will say. So my question is, what about humor in this self-transformative or self-educational context?
Yeah, so because I put the emphasis on self-education, how do you educate yourself? You have a certain position inside and you want to reach some other position. So you need some kind of criticism. But unless the criticism is compassionate, nothing would happen. Compassionate criticism for me is humor. You are looking humoristically at your own self, social self, as Sartre would say, your psychological self, your unphilosophical self, your not mature self, some aspects of you. The relationship is like Aaron and Alazon. It's like one judge and another, a little bit victim, and one parent and a child. But the relationship needs to be friendly and humorous. Why humorous? Because humor says it's true and not true. It's you and not you when you tell a joke. So there is some kind of ambiguity and ambivalence, and the human being is an ambivalent human being. And there is an ambiguity there. If you say directly, it's you, change that, nothing would happen. That play, it's me or not me. Am I really egoistical or not? What are my intentions? Is this story about me or not? That fog enables you to make some changes in the intimity of your own being that would not have happened if you would have said, do it now and seriously, in one step. So it enables you even to entertain various points of view, let the emotions and the dark ones and the one that you don't want to recognize as yourself go to consciousness, and don't ask them to identify themselves. Who are you? What are you? Are you mine or not? See them, let them have a plurilogue, not even a dialogue, together. Have all these voices talk. Don't be afraid of that, because in humor, cognitively speaking, there is a kind of paralysis. When you laugh, it's very, very weird because you cannot move any muscle. Have you thought about that? From an evolutionary point of view, what could be the point of that? The point is non-action. You cannot act. You cannot defend yourself. So even without laughing, in humor, everything freezes, and you have the possibility of looking at the various points of view and making some changes without acting too harshly or too rapidly on emotions like anger or envy, or fear. So this is very important for better deliberation. And then humor is the tool to live with conflict. When there is a conflict you cannot solve, usually you use humor to maintain the conflict and the two horns of the conflict, but then, as you said, minimize the tension between them. We look at the smile. It's like a straight line that is a little bit less tense. This is what a smile is. So this is what you do to when there are conflicts at work or in family. Generally, when you see the humor, there's a sign that there is an unresolved and unresolvable maybe conflict. But according to my own system, if you go higher, you can resolve the conflict on a higher level. And the conflict being the following. The human being, according to my own view, is a contradictory being. We have, on the one hand, all our desires, instinctual, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. And on the other hand, the possibility of fulfilling them or not fulfilling them according to what reason tells us. Of course, we can disregard reason and say, like Nietzsche, I fulfill, I do. Of course, we can also deny our desires, the ascetic tradition, many people do that. But I think that the human being is defined by this tension between the desires on all hand, on all levels, and the capacity of fulfilling them according to reason. Now, most people construe this tension, this contradiction as tragic. It's terrible for me to want to know and not to know. It's terrible for me to want to know the meaning of life and not knowing that. It's terrible for me to love that person not being loved back, etc. But once you get it, this tension, you create it as tragic, you can change that and see it as a comical incongruity. You have the desires and they are not met. Well, it's not spontaneously funny. A French philosopher, André Comte-Sponville, said that humor is the capacity to laugh at that which is not funny. Yes? It's not spontaneously funny. You just enlarge your capacity for incongruity to encompass the human condition. Because the very idea that you have a desire and that you expect, this is very Stoic, and you expect it to be realized is incongruous. Nobody's promised you that.
Lydia, it's fascinating. I'm all the time thinking about my concept here, especially at the end of your talk, because what I'm working on is how to pragmatically read Stoic dichotomy. There is the difference what we can do, what we cannot do. And what you are telling me now is that we can, if we learn how to do it, and if we try, we can change or modify the discourse about ourselves. So instead of the self-description of, oh my God, I'm in a terrible situation, it's tragic, I may convert it if I learn how to do it into kind of looking at myself by means of humor or the comic. This is what you are saying?
Yes, because listen, all humor theorists know that if they would solve the humor problem, which is still a mystery, nobody has completely solved it, despite very good theories, that they would resolve the human condition or understand what a human being is, because there is this view that humor is in a way, although we know that some animals laugh, but humor, because it's reflective in a way, describes what the human being is, or it's especially human. So what I'm saying is that you can desire and you can enjoy the desire. It's not to construe the desire as lack, but as power. Imagine a man that desires and has a lack. This is terrible. He's potent. A desire is potency. It's a force. It's not a lack. So have this desire, enjoy it, relish in it, regardless of its being realized. Because here the Stoics are right. There is a gap between you and the rest. And you can play your instrument as well as you want. You can be the most dashing person in the world. There's a gap between this and the impact and the consequences on the other person, on the world at large, in the workplace, in private relationship. And once you get that, all you can do is desire, enjoy it, and the desire looks at me, smiling back, like a snake, where should I go, because I am at the borders of my capacities after I've desired or done anything I can. You do, and you let go, of course. And whatever is considered tragic, in tragic philosophy, the gap between me and the other, in me and myself, between me and the world, you can construe as comical, as incongruous, It's very incongruous that there are two human beings, each one thinking that they are the center of the world. There's nothing to cry about. It's humorous. We are like two sumo sumo um, uh,
Wrestlers, fighters,
wrestlers
wrestlers.
that just look at each other, and just discovering that there is yet another person that wants it all. We are doomed to prefer ourselves, each of us ourselves. Isn't it comical? Whatever I say, you must go out of this talk thinking that you are the better person. I know that. I don't resent it.
Lydia, so you are also saying that it's a very pragmatic tool because it can be very effective
Yeah.
for a given person to uh, understand better and to maybe deal better with the problems when there is, as you say, desire and impossibility of realization of this desire. So
Yeah.
instead of saying, well, it's tragical or it's terrible or something, I can do it. I can redescribe the whole situation into humoristic categories.
Yes. And then because you enjoy yourself, even in that suffering or tension or the entire situation, which is comical, you come with all your heart, all your life, and there's nothing in return. So if you can see the incongruity with some enjoyment, when you enjoy yourself, there is learning, more probably learning, because learning without enjoyment, there's no reinforcement, there's no relearning. So you make sure you learn your lessons without suffering too much, which will make you actually not averse to repeat those things or to go for mistakes and correct them. Okay? Because you understand one and for all, the world doesn't owe you. There was no contract, there's no promise, do that and I will do. And the other people, of course not. They are here to survive. Once you understand that, and you understand that your own conflicts, instead of being torn by them, like the tragic figures in all literature and all history of tragic philosophy, you can enjoy that incongruity. You're an incongruous human being. I am an incongruous human being. The human condition is an incongruous situation. Of course, if you bring sin and anxiety, the situation is different.
Lydia, a very logical question. How to teach this? It is, or should it be, a part of humanistic, philosophical education, liberal arts, whatever? Is it teachable? Can
Yes.
we, or can students, I don't know, young people, old people, why young, anybody, can we learn it?
Yeah. I think it was 27 when I devised a method of teaching humor. I was very interested in that. Who can learn it? Is it the few or more? And again, is it feasible? Is it desirable? I thought it was desirable. I thought it was feasible. I worked with gifted children, but I developed a system for teaching humor systematically. I can go with a sense of humor, self-referential humor, very, very high to a form of personal philosophic redemption, really, that offers happiness in the here and now and established compassion and the feeling of eternity by happy people do not have a story or history, as Tolstoy said. So time stops in a way. So also an alternative to the eternal life, according to Christianity, and also a kind of love that's important, compassion. And so it's absolutely teachable.
But
Uh,
can you give
how?
me
I
an
have a
example?
system. I'll send you an article that shows I have also exercises. I take exercises from the everyday's life. I ask a few questions. There are some exercises. So you can see that what is tragic, because you see the genres of tragedy and comedy are connected. It's not something that I invent. And the most tragic philosophers, Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, Kierkegaard said the most melancholy person have the best sense of humor. Nietzsche said the most suffering animal had to invent laughter. There is a correlation. Once I had a client who came and said, everything I understand except the move from the tragic to the comic. I said to him, deepen the tragic.
Okay,
And he said, you're right. I'm always running away.
but
If
Lydia,
you deepen, Yeah.
Can you be more specific as far as ordinary life is concerned? For example, there is a person who feels uh, uncomfortable or maybe unhappy in his or her life, and just a regular person, how this person can learn to reduce this unhappiness or this lack of comfort or whatever by means of any exercises that would, by means of which this person could feel better in this uncomfortable situation in just regular, ordinary life.
Yeah, of course, I would say to that person, welcome to the human condition. What is needed here is a revision of what is a human life. Every person thinks they suffer separately. Suffering isolates. Yes. Once you understand that that suffering is a special case of what I said before, desires not realized, maybe because reason tells us, you talked about responsibility, that we should not, and there is a higher epistemic and ethical price in realizing. So that tension between what we want and what we get is definitive of the human condition. Once you get that, you are at home. You are accepted to the human condition. You are a variant of something that exists everywhere and at all times. Okay, by seeing that, you begin to smile at yourself that you took it so seriously. And you think you are a good exemplar of the human condition instead of a failure. You see, competition pits us one against the other because we don't talk, we don't say. And if we would talk, we would understand that everyone has the same problem because there are many desires. And then we are connected deeply with other human beings instead of being isolated by tragedy.
What I
And the comical is always social, is always connection.
what I can see, you are getting back to the Socratic self-reflection
Yes,
as basic.
yes.
Yeah.
A lot of philosophers used humor, but did not terrorize it. Socrates was using not only irony, for many, Xenophon till Karl Popper, he was a humorous person. Philosophers since the beginning, the Cynics, the Stoics used humor. The Epicureans said laughing and philosophizing at the same time. Uh, if you go to the pre-Socratic philosophers, the sophists use humor as a kind of tool. Democritus was considered a laughing philosopher. Heraclitus, the weeping philosophers. Pythagoras, the never laughing philosopher. There is a relationship with the comical since the beginning of philosophy in one way or another. It's very weird when you unravel that. You see that the relationship is not with tragedy. Philosophy is good news. It doesn't necessarily good terms with the comical because it went against the tragic view of life. So all philosophers, if they want to change values, they need to use an indirect method. They need to use humor. And usually they do that when they talk, when they teach, when they write, sometimes in a way that is exoteric, not necessarily esoteric for the general public. Because humor enables to you get your defenses down. Yes, I think Socrates was showing himself as being the ridiculous and the laughing philosopher at the same time, so that people would laugh at him and he would redirect this laughter against certain values. He was using the laughter of the audience in order to educate.
Lydia, I understand we are talking about what we can do to self-transform. We are not talking about very tragic things like wars, military conflicts, these type of things, because I don't believe here humor is something applicable. Maybe I'm wrong.
You know, that's very interesting that you asked me that. At the beginning, I thought that this system, of course, it cannot cover big personal tragedies. And then I had a woman who lost a child that heard me on the radio and insisting on coming and talking. And she said, you helped me a lot. And, for me, it was the limits. She said, no, absolutely. So it's not for us to decide which are the limits and who can use it. Or, that one part very important of humor is these very cruel jokes that people that are wounded without legs, use one against the other. This is very well documented. They won't let other people laugh at them, but they need that in order to counter anxiety. And they are very harsh with each other and it helps them. So I wouldn't say in advance who can use it, who would use it. We have testimony that in the hardest situation, people may find this useful, but it's personal choice.
Yeah.
And as I said, when you deepen the tragic, this is a survival thing. You get to the comical, because otherwise it's the end.
Okay, yeah. So I think I formulated the question in this way, that it refers to a given person that has self-transformative, let's say, ambition to deal with problems, even tragic problems with physicality and all this stuff. But so I understand that persons with disabilities may use this. But my question referred to people who are not participating in the tragedy, in the war, and they saw the war from the distance. And can they use this humor to interpret the tragical situations when people kill each other out there? It does not touch me, or it without direct reference to me, but out there, I know by means of TV or the internet, I know people are killing each other over there. So
I understand. This is a very good question. I think the law is a variant of a moral law. So do not do to others, do not laugh at others. It's only self-referential laughter. There is an Horace a sentence. What are you laughing about? Change the name and it's about yourself. So we have this tendency to distance ourselves from the others instead of laughing at ourselves. So it's self-referential, not at others. But there are some tragic philosophers like Clément Rosset, the French one who recently died. He talked about tragic laughter. He said that people, when they think of the Titanic, they don't think of the people. The Titanic that disappears, there is something comical in disappearing. With humor, you can go very deep in the ontological meaning of the comic. What do we find actually funny? Is it death? Is it disappearance? Is it that existence is not really stable? Is it that we intimate our own futility and failure in that? It's not necessary. That there is an accident on the road. People, at least where I live, they slow down the car to see. So what is it? Is it cruelty? Is it something in us? Is when someone fails or dies, we feel that we get somewhere near the truth. They are very deep and important issues that we should approach, and maybe they are more approachable through humor. But the idea is not to laugh, although if you take Schopenhauer, he wrote a tragic comedy about the wars and the evils, etc. If you take the aesthetic view of life that Nietzsche wanted so much, you would say that the Dionysian or the godly point of view is always comical. For us, it's tragic. For Nietzsche, the redemption would be to adopt for yourself the godlike vision. But it should never be without taking into consideration the personal tragedies of people and forcing them to laugh at this. This will be very cruel. But listen, this is a higher level of the comical, because you need to hold personal tragedy with comical viewpoint. So, and you cannot fully. So we are a little bit ridiculous because we have to suffer, and yet we know that this may be futile. And this is even a harder thing to address with humor. Then I need the word ridiculous. Maybe we're ridiculous in taking our life so seriously, or the playwrights of the absurd said that it is even more tragical, the fact that our tragedy is futile. And I say something that is both tragic and comic at the last effect cannot be tragic, because the tragic is either or and the comical is and. It must be a higher form of the comical, which I call the ridiculous. When you embrace the fact that you're ridiculous, that we need to take our life very seriously, although we know it's not so serious, when you accept that, we are free of being ridiculous. The tragic and the comic disappears and something else opens up.
Before I will ask you or return to the problem of happiness here, because it's obvious we are talking about the human condition and happiness or unhappiness is a part of this. Before, I would like to ask you, is this what we are talking about, this humor, the comic and so on, do they have a therapeutic importance? Because according to what at least I'm hearing from you is that it has some therapeutic element here. And if I have a group of therapeutic philosophy group, and it's interesting to hear about this humor, element maybe of a therapeutic philosophical project.
Yeah, I think it has, because once one realized that everyone knows and feels that they are ridiculous, except always one or two professors that stand up in my lecture and said, I'm not ridiculous. But everybody knows that, but they think it's a personal predicament. And once you have a group talking about that, and you see that we are all variations of the same theme, and all the more ridiculous because we think that our predicament is personal, but it's the same. So once we realize that, we are liberated for that burden. When a person goes on a bus and they have a stain here, so they think that the problem is that people are going to see that and laugh at them. So they try to show everybody on the bus that they know they have a stain. I was in the situation I was doing as if I know, because it makes the entire difference. If you're aware of that, you are ridiculous no more. That's very interesting. That means it's not an objective situation. The awareness changes everything. Once you are aware of your impossibility of breaking free, of having to take your life seriously, the responsibility you talked about, and yet at the same time that it doesn't matter so much as much as we know. So the playful part or the free part or the experimental part at the same time. And you see that you cannot actually have them both apart. You need to combine them somehow. So you are doomed to be ridiculous. You are doomed to be that very serious, you cannot say, I'm doing nothing because I may die in 1 minute. This society does not accept, but everybody knows that this may be true. You see, so even in that, we are in a ridiculous situation. We have to make as if we are not going to die, or as if we are master of destiny, which of course we are not. And everybody knows that, but you cannot say that at work. Maybe I don't come tomorrow because maybe I'm dead. Nobody would accept that, but this is the truth. So once we realize that we are all dancing on these truths that are not told and living impossible lives, impossible projects, then we relax because we accept that and we see that situation is quite impossible. But instead of impossible and in the tragic way, you can just enjoy the incongruity of it.
Okay. So now we can return to something we already discussed, but since it may be central for at least some of in our audiences, happiness as a means. So happiness usually is seen as something that culminates our efforts, and we do not need anything more when we are happy. It is kind of the end of what we can do in life. We are happy and that's it, except for maybe maintaining this. And I read in one of your books that you talk about happiness as a means. So I suspect now that what you were talking about is that a happy person can be a good transmitter of good energy, good ideas to others. Or I'm wrong, or you were thinking
Yes.
about something else.
Yeah, of that, but more than that, because most philosophers said that virtue is the means to happiness, except of two philosophers, Spinoza and Nietzsche. They say, because you're happy, you can be virtuous. Why? Spinoza says, because you're happy, you can control your instincts or desires better. And Nietzsche thinks that all ill in the world comes from resentment and being unhappy. So virtue would come from being happy. So following these two, when you're happy, it's the beginning, it's not the end. It's the beginning of action, free of resentment, of openness, of creation, of breathing, of doing. And it's the beginning of um, virtuous life, if you want, with not much effort, because they made some psychological tests checking that. For example, if you leave one coin in a booth, public phone booth, and the person finds that. So apparently they're so joyous that when they go out, they help old lady move across the street, and they help someone who fell. All this was checked. So it's very interesting. This is true that when we're happy, even momentarily, we are more generous, more tolerant, more helpful. So happiness would be, when it's stable, for me, the beginning of everything. So we should hurry and be happy, because there's much to do after that.
Okay. Let me change a little bit our conversation into, we may call it case study. Many people talk about burnout these days. They work very hard and for some period of time. So burnout means that at their work and maybe in their lives, they do not want to do it anymore because they feel fatigue, they are tired, no energy, no nothing. And perhaps one of the reasons would be their feeling or conviction that they are not perfect and they want to be more perfect and they work very hard in this or that area and it's too much at some point. I'm not interested so much about this aiming at perfection thing. I'm interested more in this burnout thing. Do you have anything to say about what to say to people who say, I'm suffering from burnout? Meaning, I'm fed up. I don't want to go on. And even if they go to vacation for, I don't know, 1 month, nothing really changes. So can we have any suggestion except, well, everything, you can do it. I mean, you can self-educate, you can self-transform by redescription into humorous comic situation you are in. What could we say in such a situation?
Well, first we have to acknowledge that objectively you were talking about social institutions. So number of hours of work, it's a political decision. There is no need to work so much. I see
Earn
in
money,
France.
earn money. To...
No, there's no. Well, this is another topic. There's no. The interest of the individual are many times at odds with those of society. Society wants to be rich, wants to have a free market, but the individual is burning out for it. And it's being induced into buying more and more and not enjoying. It's not the buying that will get the happiness. Competition nothing worth for happiness, comparing, envying, etc. This is not good. And so it's a political decision how many hours you're supposed to work. And I think that societies and politicians do not want people to be free in the street. And we have to bear that in mind, that the problems are objective. And then we get home and you have very few hours to disengage, and then you have a lot to do at home and it's not worth to disengage, and you're actually being used. And I don't want to minimize that, but it's important to see things are as they are. Now, what can I say? You know, Albert Camus wrote a book about Sisyphus. It's Sisyphus. This is why going to holiday doesn't help. He said, we have to imagine Sisyphus happy. I say, no, this is very harsh. We shouldn't imagine him happy, but we can imagine him amused because he gets the joke, and the joke as its expense, and he understands the situation. Now is his life. He has to be happy. He has to choose. He has to enjoy what he's doing, because at the end of the day, there won't be any happiness unless that person manages to create that. And understanding the system, you know, even it's terrible what I'm going to say, in imprisonment, everywhere, in this kind of cage that maybe life is the way it is now. And the only freedom we may have is the capacity to enjoy. And once we lose that, we have lost everything. But if we enjoy ourselves, then we are winners in our failure.
Lydia, in a sense, you are very close to me in this, what I want to develop, the Stoic Pragmatism, because you have definitely the Stoic trajectory that says that much depends upon us and we are free. I mean, the freedom we can use actually depends on us, the tools that we use. And you are all the time talking about the pragmatic dimension of that if we use skillfully certain things that we can control, we can make it. So you are using a little bit different terminology, but exactly what I would like to develop in my project. So that's why I cannot see any tension or disagreement here, although you are using, interestingly, things that I did not think before about. The second thing that I would say, case study, I want to talk about moral conflict without good solution, but I suspect I know the answer to that, because again, you probably, if I ask you what to do with when we have a moral conflict and we know it's not a good solution. So whatever we do, there's gonna be something problematic. You could convert it using your method. If I understand it well, this method of converting it, for example, into the humoristic or comic kind of situation. Is that right?
Yes, because of course, when you are in a situation in which there is no good solution, you are taking responsibility for that as if you are the first one and the last one, and it's your fault. It's not your fault. It's the way it's done or created or construed. And so it's very important to understand our limits. It's a little bit megalomaniac to think that I am a tragic person. You know, they were contesting the gods. With a little bit more of humility, what can you do? You don't have to compromise in a way of, so I'm never going to do something more. But to see that it's a lesser evil, or that you are not a good solution at that point, is very humble. It's very humane. It's very human. And this is what we have to learn, the real limits and limitation. You know, this is why it's not averse to religion, or people who really want to be humble. It may be averse to other forms of religiosity. I don't know, but it's understanding the perspective you talked about, and doing very humbly the best you can do in the situation, the deliberation, and then smiling at the situation. You know, I had once a patient who came to the patient, a client who came to the practice of philosophical practice that I have. And she was crying and saying, I have a wonderful husband and he loves me. And I have a wonderful lover and he loves me. And she was crying. And I looked at her and I said, you know, you describe me to wonderful men, both love you, and you are crying. You know, there are some women who do not have even one man or one man that love them. So to turn the situation and see that it's that there's plenty instead of a lack, you know, I have to choose, but there's plenty. The situation is humorous in a way. It's plentiful. You have a lot. This is a gift. Who can choose between two men? You know, so you're afraid of making a mistake. Yes, this is something different, but enjoy first the luxury. And we never enjoy the luxury. We
are
have so many, I'm sorry, to that example, so many moral choices. You know, we have we have choices. We are more to enjoy the variety first.
you are doing exactly what I am trying or have been trying for a longer period of time, to see the common platform for two different philosophical projects. The first is Stoicism, the second is neo-pragmatism. When neo-pragmatism, not pragmatism, but neo-pragmatism, when they focused upon the role of language and modification of language, redescription of the same thing. When you redescribe a little bit something, this something becomes something different to you. It seems to me you are saying exactly this, that if you're, again, I'm getting back to the Stoic dichotomy, there are things we can do, things we cannot do. So we can redescribe ourselves in such a way that it will practically make us see ourselves in a better way. It does not have to be fake news. It does not have to be illusion. It can be showing us a different perspective from which, or additional perspective from which we can look at ourselves in order to better deal with the issue that we have to deal anyway.
Yes, but you know what the trick is? We never quite know what is up to us and what is not. You see, this is where it begins to be interesting, you know, a higher level. We don't never go. So here to be gracious, to accept the fact that we are ridiculous, you know, we we don't know. Yes, we don't know. So should we try or not? Should we let go or not? Both at the same time, which is quite difficult. But you do maybe martial arts, or you may understand that, or a Christian may understand. This is this is a combination of two opposites way, staying and running, trying and letting go, successing and failing. Do you understand? Being redeemed and falling. This is the human condition anyway. So here to have a good personal sense of humor on yourself, you know, knowing that you're trying against all odds with grace. That means that you're trying without knowing if this is to you or not to you, for you or not for you, and you accept any outcome. You let go.
Please tell me, and it is a part of my next question actually. Where is the place of something that used to be crucial for philosophy? I don't know what about now in education, something that we called critical thinking. Is it important here now? How do you
It's very
understand critical thinking?
well. Looked at the COVID. We had to use critical thinking. People were saying contradictory things. We had to decide, should we put the mask? Should we get vaccinated? Should we, who to follow, who to believe? It's not that we had the best means of deciding. We couldn't trust many people. But those who could think a little bit more clearly, even if difficult times, were a little bit better off. At least the best they could think and taking responsibility for them and maybe their families in those times. So we cannot do without critical thinking. So this is one of the jobs of philosophers. Actually, philosophers do a great job of preparing people for democracy. And democracy assumes autonomy, and autonomy assumes independent thinking and then critical thinking. And there's no way, this is what philosophers should do. Between infancy and adulthood, there is a great gray area that philosophers should take over and help people get the means, to what? To minimize the tension between liberty and equality, because they say we are all free, but give us equality in education to be able to act on this freedom well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We did talk about happiness. Let me just briefly ask you about success. So the capitalistic idea of success is probably to have more, to buy more, or to produce more. When you can buy many things, people will say you are successful because you are rich or something. But there are many other meanings of success. I would say success, I would understand success in these existential terms or private terms when I have loving people around me. For example, a happy family. I'm happy. Having family that is happy around me, having access to different types of goods, basic goods, and harmony of different things that I desire to achieve, to practice, or to exercise. This synchronization of different things that are progressing, kind of eudaimonia in this old philosophical language. Do you have something as kind of understanding of success, or is it a word that is has more problems or produce more problems, that people want to be successful but have no idea too much what is success they are aiming at?
Success is more an internal concept than external. There are many successful people who are not happy, not harmonious, not peaceful, and so you couldn't decide by the outside appearance of things how people feel inside. They can be hell inside them, around them. So success is managing not to live in hell inside, regardless of how it looks in the outside. It's, as you said, reaching a kind of harmony, harmonizing the various desires, the various wishes, the various capacities, and you cannot harmonize them all, and gracefully giving up without a sense of compromising those who cannot. It's just having a more realistic view of who you are and what reality is and how maybe you can match things. But it's an internal feeling, and maybe it's not easily defined. I need that, I need that. It's very slippery, the desires. It it depends more of a certain attitude that you may have, regardless of if you have the love or not the love, or the work or not the work. It's something like creating, as I said, stable character, and a character that you may enjoy. When you enjoy yourself. Think about that. It's enjoying yourself. It's self-enjoyment. When you manage to have that without relinquishing your humanity, without saying, I have best part, I have virtues, I enjoy that, an entire human being and enjoying that, this is success.
It's my final question. You have much experience as a teacher, academic teacher, but also as a coach. You do coaching, counseling. Uh, do you have any ideas about it? I mean, do you convert these humanistic, philosophical ideas into the practice of coaching, for example?
I do not coach. I do not call it coaching. A coach that helps you get actually your goals in life. A philosopher would actually challenge your goals first.
Counseling, you counseling.
Yeah, and I don't think there's counseling. What counsel a philosopher can give, maybe to a king or something like that, but any
Okay.
counsel. So it's a philosophical practice. It's a way of practicing philosophy that I'm offering in the academe and outside the academe. I think that the philosopher has a responsibility towards their community. A philosopher is living in luxury, in plenitude. He studied many years philosophy, he can read, he can think, you know, he should be a little bit graceful about that and benevolent with that and generous with that and share whatever they learn with people, adapting to the needs, to the capacities, to the interest of those around him, and diagnosing the philosophic problems, notions, questions that happen to be around them in the groups. As philosophers, there's a salience of philosophic problems that we more easily see, other people do not see. We may problematize things that would be eye opener. So when you come to a group, when you are part of an epoch, you can easily identify those points that only philosopher can address well. For example, injustice, injustice. It's not a question for the law. Of course, the law, of course, of that, but all people know that in court, it's not justice that is being done. The philosophic question of justice and injustice is not a psychologist, not a lawyer, not a priest that can approach. A philosopher can and should. Many other things, love, the varieties of love, sex, the good life, what is part of that, the values of that, the ideal, would it be harmony, would it be flourishing, peace of mind, and self-realization, and how, and authenticity, and maybe, you know, Alain Badiou, the contemporary philosopher, says that it's not only in the past that philosophy was the key to happiness. He thinks to this day philosophy is the key to happiness and also the only means to happiness.
Only.
So yes, and you know, it's a contemporary philosopher. So I think that rekindling the discussion on happiness, addressing the meaning. I think that meaning of life, we don't know what it is. And meaning in life is quite self-defeating because it's only meaning in life, you know, it's not the meaning of life. But happy we can be. And when we are happy, the question of meaning disappears. This, I think I'm the first to say that happiness trumps meaning. If you cannot be happy, then you go to happiness. But if you can, try it. So in the practice, I'm trying to bridge between philosophy and the general public. I have clients that are individuals, I have couples, I have families, I have groups, I am on Zoom. There was an article in the New Yorker, I think 2 years ago, about what I'm doing. And apparently people find it helpful. And if they go from me to a psychologist, they arrive very, very ready because they have made the turn of what is rationally possible. So they have no defenses left.
Lydia, it's been wonderful time. I mean, talking to you. I have learned many things about humor and its self-therapeutic importance, the self-knowledge, self-transformation, and many other things. And they maybe the most importantly, the practicality of philosophy, that it is not just something, as many people think, reading books. It is just the practice of the good life. So thank you very much for your thoughts.
It's a practice of the good life and intense and rich human relation, and also between a teacher or a philosopher and a client or a student. It's the example of the richness and the complexity of a human being that is warm and open. that may make the difference.
And this is a very nice conclusion to our talk.
It was a pleasure talking to you, Chris. Frankly, wonderful. And I thank you so much for enlightening my eyes that there is a form of pragmatism in my thought. I was not educated in pragmatism or neo-pragmatism, so I had no idea. I know, of course, about Stoicism. I'm very grateful to you, and I look forward for further cooperation.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you so much, Chris. Bye-bye.